Hello, you're watching World Business Report. I'm Jonathan Josephson. Welcome to you wherever in the world you're watching from. Let's start with a warning that the war in Ukraine risks pushing hundreds of millions of people into poverty because of rising food prices. The head of the World Bank has told the BBC that it risks causing a human catastrophe, and that's because Ukraine is a huge exporter of food such as sunflower oil and wheat, and many of those supplies have been cut off from global markets because of the war. Now, the World Bank's president, David Malpass, was speaking to our economics editor, Faisal Islam, in Washington, where the development body is holding its annual spring meeting.
We are expecting a big new addition to people in extreme poverty. And as I say, it's magnified because of the prices. When prices go up, the poor can't afford them. That's obvious. And they get crowded out of the market.
What are we talking about? A few million?
We're talking about, tens and tens of millions of people pushed into poverty, maybe hundreds of millions before it's done. We don't know how long it'll go.
So the world is facing the food crisis as well?
There is enough food in the world. We're entering this crisis with global stockpiles pretty large by historical standards. And so that's good. And there'll have to be a sharing process or a sales process. People can make money from the higher prices, so they'll enter the market. And so I think there's enough, but people in poor countries are going to be left out because of the high price.
And just how high prices and how broad will, in terms of the poverty that's created, is the problem?
On a year-over-year basis, we're looking at maybe 37% increase in food prices. That's huge, and it's particularly focused, magnified for the poor because they spend more of their money, or what little money they may have, it goes to food. And so when the food prices go up, it means they eat less and have less money for anything else, for schooling. And so that means that it's really an unfair kind of crisis. It hits the poorest the hardest.
And it seems like an extraordinary pressure on the world's most vulnerable, that these two crises, which are not of their own making in any way, follow so closely after each other. Just how much under pressure are the world's poor from the confluence of these two crises?
It's a human catastrophe, meaning nutrition goes down, but then it also becomes a political challenge for governments who can't do anything about it. They didn't cause it, and they see the prices going up. They want to subsidize it for their people. What we're encouraging the world to do is increase supply wherever you can of energy, of fertilizer, and of food, and then also do targeted assistance. So if you can really separate out and treat the vulnerable within the population, that's going to be the best.
That was the president of the World Bank, David Malpass, talking to our economics editor, Faisal Islam. Now, the governor of Russia's central bank has been reappointed for a third term in office. The State Duma, or the lower house of parliament, has given Elvira Nabiullina another 5 years as she tries to steer the economy through an unprecedented crisis. Russia's invasion of Ukraine means the economy is suffering from widespread sanctions, and many foreign companies are pulling out, which means prices are rising and so too are interest rates. And that's all having a big impact. Last month, the Kremlin said that giving her a third term would help to maintain macroeconomic stability in the country. Well, let's get more on this and turn to Chris Weaver, who is Chief Executive of Macro Advisory, which is a business consultancy focusing on Russia and the surrounding region. He joins us from London. Chris, thanks for coming on the show. Let's start with this. I mean, with those interest rates that have risen since this war started and the widespread inflation in the Russian economy, price of everything going up, what are the biggest challenges for Ms. Nabiullina as she starts this third term? Because she has said inflation is the key target here.
Yes, she made a presentation to Parliament a few days ago. She talked about the challenges of bringing inflation lower. But unlike, say, in 2014 and 15, when Russia was importing a lot of food and therefore inflation was driven by the weak currency on the food imports, this time round Russia is almost self-sufficient in food. But the big problem, she said, is the price rises on logistics, on materials, and Russia trying to import products to keep the economy functioning. But that said, there is evidence that the inflation has peaked for now. We had 17% inflation at the end of March. It looked like towards the end of March that the week-on-week inflation rate was coming down. And this is why she was talking more optimistically about being able to cut the interest rate further and very soon.
Well, Chris, with those changes to interest rates, though, will that help the Russian people? Because there are suggestions that many millions will be pushed into poverty and there will be widespread job losses. Is that going to be a key challenge for her?
Oh, enormous. And this was actually one of the main points that she made at her presentation earlier in the week. She said that up to now, the main pressures from sanctions have been on the financial market, on the currency, of course, which the central bank has now managed to stabilize. They're managing the currency. It's no longer free floating as it used to. And this is why it's back down at just around the 80 level against the dollar. She said about the pressures in the financial system, about currency transfers, but she specifically warned that the impact of sanctions is now starting to affect the broader economy, and highlighted the fact that companies are now starting to run out of inventories, are running out of spare parts or materials to make products, and therefore we are likely to see more company closures and therefore more job layoffs in the next couple of months. So she was very clear in her warning that we are now about to see the real impact of these sanctions on the broader economy in the next few months, and certainly coming into Q3.
So lots of challenges there for the reappointed governor of Russia's central bank to deal with. Chris Weaver from Macro Advisory, thank you very much for joining us. Now let's turn to Tesla, because the uncertainty hanging over the global economy and the soaring commodity prices mean the electric car maker has done really well to continue powering ahead, because it's put out another great set of numbers, which means the shares have opened up again in New York. And let's have a breakdown of some of those numbers. Tesla racked up sales of $18 billion in the first 3 months of this year, as you can see here. And that was an 81% increase on the same period a year ago. So it's all going pretty well. And as you can see here, that means $3.3 billion of profits. Now, that's 600% more than it managed in the same time last year. So what does all this mean? Well, Dan Ives is from the US investment firm Wedbush Securities, and he told me that Tesla has done really well considering all the widespread challenges it's been facing.
When you look at these results, their back was against the wall, given the supply chain issues. And of course, what we're seeing in China is zero COVID. That's a key artery for them. These are almost Cinderella-like numbers. I mean, $1 billion beat. They're navigating this much better than the street expected. Look, China's the elephant in the room. If there's another COVID shutdown there, that's 2,000 cars per day. The street has sort of factored that in. Overall, ripped the Band-Aid off. I mean, this is a result and guidance that really shows Tesla's lead in EVs is increasing, not decreasing.
So lots of confidence there, but at the same time, by Elon Musk's own admission, prices have been rising for these electric cars. They're already pretty expensive. Commodity prices are on the rise. That's everything from the steel to the battery materials. Do you think that consumers are going to carry on paying those higher prices and that Tesla will be able to keep its sales on track?
Yeah, I think that was the key question going into last night, because look at Netflix raising prices, obviously saw churn. You look at Tesla, I mean, they're raising prices, really no impact to demand, actually demand increasing. I think it shows that they continue to have room to raise price higher because demand's outstripping supply right now by about 30%. And I think you start to put that together with overall the biggest transformation to the auto industry since 1950s with EV that Tesla's leading. Of course, you got the China issue, but forest through the trees, I mean, this is really just a massive transformation story in the making.
That was Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities. I'm on Twitter at Jonathan Josephs. There's plenty more on the website. Thanks for watching.